All right, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be coming from. Apologize for the late start. I was in the lounge, the speaker's lounge. So technical difficulties, not because of the team, but because of me. Apologize for that. And for those of you that had an opportunity to listen to General Breedlove, I've heard him speak before. I'm sure it was powerful. And so it's an honor to follow his perspective on everything from mission command to leadership. So again, good afternoon. Sgt Stalker here. I'm going to go through quite a bit. So go ahead and relax, take some notes. And if during this time we have any questions or at the end, I'll address all of the questions that might be out there. All right. And it is an absolute honor to be here today with all of you, whether you're airmen, guardians, or whatever your service is, civilians, spouses, you name it. It's an honor to be here. And I'm going to do my best to focus on the subject of mission command, both from how I'm going to deliver this, which is in 3 sections. I'm going to talk about the past, the present, and what I believe to be a bit of the future. And then I'm going to specifically answer some of the questions that I was asked to talk about so that you have it all addressed. All right. So again, good morning. As a retired Marine Master Gunnery Sergeant, it is an absolute privilege to be here with the Air Force Sergeants Association. While our uniforms and our colors may be different, the warrior ethos that connects us is all the same. I want to talk to you today about something that is central to that ethos, something that will define our success, and I mean that as a veteran, our success in the next generation of warfare, which is mission command. I'm not speaking to you today as just a Marine, although my career has given me a unique perspective on the modern battle space. But early on in my career, I did mostly tactical missions at the battalion and the regiment and the division within the Marine Expeditionary Units and squadrons. And so my 7 combat tours come well before some of the more strategic opportunities that I had. I had the honor of serving as the command senior enlisted leader of United States Space Command, where I retired from. And prior to that, I held the same position at the Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, and U.S. Cyber Command. Before that, in my first role as an E9, a Master Gunnery Sergeant, I was the Intelligence Chief for Marine Corps Forces Special Operations Command. Today, I continue to focus on these critical challenges as a senior fellow at the National Defense University, among several other things that I do in retirement. This experience has shown me firsthand how every domain, from the ground to the cyber and space environments, is intertwined. It has also showed me that our greatest advantage is not our technology, it is our people. And I know that's a buzzword and a lot of people say it. I sincerely mean it. And I'm going to talk to you about why I believe that, along with some historical examples. So let's get into the first phase of this conversation. Let's start with history. All right. And I'm going to call it a lesson from a prophet. This is not a biblical reference. It's just my terminology. So to truly understand where we are going, we must first look at where we have been. The early 20th century was a time of immense military pride, rooted in tradition and established doctrine. Naval power was the undisputed measure of a nation's might, with the battleship as its crown jewel, a colossal floating fortress of steel and heavy guns. Military thinking, heavily influenced by the rigid, brutal trench warfare of World War I, was defined by a centralized command structure where orders flowed from the top down without question. In this world, the idea of air power was a novel, unproven concept, largely viewed as a reconnaissance tool, or as many of its contemporaries called it, little more than a flying kite. That's what air power was thought of back then. The U.S. military didn't even have a separate Air Force. It first had the Army Air Service before developing the Army Air Corps, a small, underfunded component. It's an important historical detail. During Colonel Billy Mitchell's time, the Army's aviation branch was known as the Army Air Service, not yet the Army Air Corps or the independent Air Force we know today. This was the world Brigadier General and later back to Colonel Billy Mitchell, a true military heretic. This is the world that he was in. The story of his fight is a powerful lesson in foresight, leadership, and the resistance to change. He was not a man from humble beginnings. His influential family gave him access and a certain confidence to challenge authority. After serving in the Spanish-American War and commanding all U.S. air combat units in World War I, Mitchell returned home with a revolutionary vision. He was a prophet in an era that wasn't ready for his gospel, believing all air power could render the mighty battleship obsolete and serve as the decisive factor in future conflicts. He was thought of as a crazy man, quite frankly. Mitchell embarked on a tireless and public crusade to provide his conviction that air power was the future. His fiery public stance put him on a direct collision course with the most powerful figures in the Army and Navy, who saw his bold claim that air power could destroy naval power as an attack on the very identity of the military. He fought fiercely for a separate independent Air Force, arguing that its mission was too critical to be subservient to other services. To prove his point, Mitchell organized a series of dramatic bombing tests in 1921, securing permission to use captured German warships as targets. Despite open criticism from naval leaders, Mitchell's bombers delivered a stunning performance. His most famous demonstration was the sinking of the German battleship SMS Ostfriesland in just over 20 minutes. It was a national spectacle, but the official military boards quickly dismissed the findings as unscientific and a rigged test. They were trying to protect their entities. However, Mitchell's most chilling and prophetic insight came in a 1925 report to Congress. In it, he laid out a stunning prediction for the future of warfare in the Pacific. He wrote in explicit detail that an enemy power, which would have to be Japan, could launch an air raid against the U.S. fleet based at its base in Hawaii. He specifically named Pearl Harbor as the likely target. He detailed the non-kinetic and kinetic effect of such an attack, a vision of the future that was so radical at the time, it was dismissed as pure fantasy. He was mocked and laughed at for his ideas. This open institutional resistance pushed Mitchell to a breaking point. When a series of naval air disasters led to the loss of airmen and aircraft, he publicly accused senior leaders of incompetency, criminal negligence, and almost treasonable administration of the national defense. His direct insubordination was the final straw. He was charged, court-martialed, and found guilty. He was not punished for being wrong. He was punished for being right too early. His small, dedicated group of early aviators were an anomaly, a testament to what disciplined, forward-thinking leadership could achieve, even when the rest of the institution was dragging its feet. And I'll argue here later that much of Billy Mitchell's thinking of why a flying kite could lead to air power is how we need to think, especially in cyber and space. What are the flying kites in cyber and space today, and how do we need to revolutionize so that we can fight differently there? Today, we would not consider a single military operation without first securing air superiority. The flying kite of his day is now the foundation of our entire combat capability and the leadership it demanded. That foresight and willingness to challenge the status quo is the exact same spirit we will need in the future. His story is a powerful reminder that our institutions must be willing to empower disruptive thinking and decentralize authority. And decentralized authority is also known as mission command, or they risk being made obsolete by it. So let's move on to the second phase of this. Today's environment beyond multi-domain. Far too often I hear about multi-domain. Quite frankly, it makes me want to croak. We should be talking, thinking, and training all domain, not multi-domain. So today we are facing our own Billy Mitchell moment. As I said, the old way of thinking was multi-domain. It was a product of a Cold War era when conflicts could be compartmentalized. We had a siloed approach, the Army doing its thing on land, the Navy at sea, the Air Force in the sky, and so on. We operated with the luxury of time and relatively uncontested battlefield, which allowed us to coordinate our actions from a centralized headquarters with little interference. The government-only fight meant that our military was primarily responsible for all aspects of national defense, from logistics to intelligence. Today, that old paradigm is gone. We have moved decisively beyond it and are operating in an all-domain, joint, and integrated environment. This isn't just a change in terminology. It's a fundamental shift in how we must think and fight. It means that an action in one domain, say a cyber attack, can have immediate and devastating kinetic effects on a unit on the ground. A satellite in the space domain can provide critical intelligence feed that is essential for a Navy ship in the sea domain. All 5 domains are now interconnected, and our ability to operate seamlessly across them is a price of entry to modern conflict. This is a significant evolution for a joint force that spent the last 2 decades focused on the global war on terror. In the GWAT environment, we had the luxury of a nearly uncontested battle space. We could operate with overwhelming air superiority, unchallenged access to space-based intelligence, and a predictable threat environment in a long, protracted counterinsurgency fight. We had the time and freedom of movement to plan and execute missions with a high degree of centralized control. And that's a key theme I want you to hear: centralized control. Today, that is no longer the case. The nature of conflict has changed completely. We are now facing near peer, and I would argue peer competitors who can challenge us in every domain simultaneously. The environment is no longer uncontested. It is a high-end, all-domain fight where time is a luxury we no longer have. The speed, unpredictability, and complexity of this new era demand a complete paradigm shift in how we lead and how we fight. This new reality means the battlefield is now everywhere. Our adversaries understand this, and so should we. Our competitors are not just building advanced fighter jets and warships. They are also waging an aggressive information war. Information itself has become what many would call the 6th domain, but it's actually known as the 7th Joint Warfighting Function. Disinformation campaigns designed to sow doubt and division are launched daily, targeting not just our troops, but our entire society. The use of deepfakes and other forms of manipulated media has created a profound lack of trust. Quite frankly, I saw a video this morning, a video that I thought was real. It was by President Obama. I was watching it, and after a while, I realized that's probably not something he would say. I was tricked into believing a deepfake. It's incredible. Manipulated media has created a profound lack of trust, making it so, and when I talk about manipulated media, I'm speaking specifically to deepfakes, making it so that you cannot believe everything you see, read, or watch. You must now confirm everything that you think you know, to include battlefield intelligence. What your family and friends read online can have a direct impact on our national security. And what you see as a small, isolated piece of intelligence may be the missing puzzle piece in a largely globally integrated operation. And for those of you that are not quite so certain about the power of the information environment, I would invite you to read about Mahmoud Bouazizi, who was a Tunisian street vendor and set himself on fire due to being bullied. And that single act was recorded, went viral on social media. And most experts will tell you that event, that bit of information and his actions led to the Arab Spring. Furthermore, it's no longer just about the government. We used to talk about we need a government approach, a whole of government approach. I think that is a woefully outdated mindset. It is now an all of society approach. Our adversaries are leveraging commercial technology from satellite constellations to social media networks to gain an advantage. To win, our response must be also all-encompassing. Excuse me. That is why the lines between Silicon Valley and the Pentagon have blurred. Our adversaries understand that the modern battlefield is no longer confined to military assets. It extends to the commercial satellites that power our GPS, the civilian networks that carry our data, and the academic institutions that are developing the next generation of disruptive technologies. They are fighting an all-of-society war, and our response must reflect that. This requires us to think beyond traditional military roles. A joint operation today might involve an Air Force cyber team working alongside a Marine Special Operations unit to disable an enemy's network, all while a commercial partner provides critical imagery from low Earth orbit and a global telecommunications company helps to protect against a disrupted denial of service attack. Your unit's mission, however small it may seem, is now a critical node in this massive interconnected ecosystem. The speed of information has collapsed the decision-making cycle, and the proliferation of sensors from drones to smartphones means that the battle space is more transparent and chaotic than ever before. This integrated multi-layer environment demands a new kind of leadership, a new kind of warfighter, and a new kind of command. This is why our profession is no longer a job. It's not enough to just show up and do what you're told. We must be masters of our profession, brilliant at the fundamentals, because our ability to communicate with our leaders 24/7 will be challenged. When the satellite links are jammed and the network is down, the responsibility for success falls on the master practitioner, the expert on the ground. That means leadership from junior enlisted to NCOs is no longer just important, it is absolutely critical. And I want you to think about this as we operate today. How often 24/7, 365 do our networks work in a non-contested environment? We have challenges alone just operating in garrison. Imagine throwing in an adversary such as China or Russia, who are working purposely to deny and degrade our capabilities. All right, let's flow on to phase 3 of this conversation here, the future of conflict, a denied and degraded space. This is what I see. You may see it differently, and I'd love to have you challenge me in the comments. Tomorrow's fight will be even more challenging. The very complexity that makes us strong is what our enemies will exploit. Our most significant competitor, China, is building a military specifically designed to deny us our traditional advantages and to hold our nation at risk. They want nothing more than to minimize our use of space and cyber and to make us only an air, land, and sea force pre-Gulf War. This is not just about competing weapon systems. It is a fundamental shift in their warfighting doctrine. China has invested heavily in creating anti-access aerial denial, or A2AD, network to push our forces out of their region. They are modernizing their conventional and nuclear forces, developing advanced hypersonics to evade our missile defenses, and weaponizing artificial intelligence to gain a decision-making advantage. We are not just facing a threat from their warships or aircraft, but from their cyber units, their space weapons, and their information warfare campaigns that can reach our people at home. In the future, we will have to fight from our bases and stations and fight to get to the fight. Adversaries will deny and degrade our use of the cyber domain, making it harder to communicate, plan, and analyze intelligence. Your ability to get orders from headquarters will be crippled. We will be jammed and spoofed in the space domain, making it a challenge to communicate via SATCOM, degrading our GPS, and blinding our space-based intelligence sensors. China's ability to strike our homeland and hold our assets at risk across all 5 domains is not a distant threat. It is a current reality. They will use both non-kinetic and kinetic weapons to limit the use of our own, creating a chaotic and disconnected battlefield. This is a scenario where the fog of war becomes a digital blackout, when your commander's intent is all you have because the satellite feed is gone and the network is down. The fight becomes a series of decentralized micro conflicts. The very tools and information we have come to rely on will be degraded or outright denied. And the ability of a junior enlisted leader to make a decision in that moment will be the ultimate determinant of success or failure. And in many ways, that is why, again, I believe our people are our strategic advantage, because both China and Russia would never trust, never mind a junior officer, but never trust an NCO or an enlisted member to make decisions, where we will not only do it, but we will win because of it. This is why small unit leadership in a conflict is not just important. It is the single most critical factor for survival and success. Our adversaries, particularly China, will not fight a fair fight, nor do they want to. They will deliberately target our networks, our communications, and our intelligence links with non-kinetic weapons like jammers and advanced cyber tools to isolate our units. They will use cyber attacks not to disable a system, but to disrupt a command and control network, creating confusion, doubt, and uncertainty. In that chaos, the small unit leader becomes the de facto commander, responsible for interpreting the mission, assessing the situation, and acting with disciplined initiative. Without the ability to rely on constant direction from above, the burden of command will rest on you, and your ability to lead with confidence and sound judgment will decide the outcome of the fight. The key operational challenge we face is a potential conflict over Taiwan. You all know that. This is not a war we can fight with a centralized command structure. It's also not an inevitable war. However, the strategic importance of Taiwan, from its critical role in the global semiconductor industry to its geopolitical position in the Indo-Pacific, makes it the central flashpoint of this new era. A conflict there would be the ultimate test of our readiness and our ability to operate in this denied and degraded environment. An airman landing on an austere airfield in the Pacific or a Marine securing a beach will find it challenging to get orders from our headquarters or even to report on their progress. And specifically at the unclassified level, I can refer you back to a Wall Street Journal article that was written several years ago. And you may recall when President Xi said that they were going to reclaim some islands and remake those islands. And he assured the international community that not only was he going to remake what was rightfully China's, that they were never going to weaponize or militarize those islands. And oddly enough, some people believed him. He then went on to not just militarize, but weaponize those islands, but specifically in a way that I think most people missed. And that is the fact that he layered from north to south, all throughout that first island chain, jamming capability, which is going to make it challenging for us at the tactical and operational level, if we get inside that first island chain, to communicate, to navigate, and to effectively receive intelligence or new updates from our leadership. That's why we're talking about Mission Command today. So let's talk about the role of leadership and lessons from the front. Again, this is why Mission Command is no longer a buzzword. It is a single most important leadership philosophy we have. I believe that. It is the only way we will prevail in the future fight. You are not going to have the luxury of talking to your captain, your lieutenant colonel, your generals, your chiefs. You're not going to have that luxury. It's not going to happen. When communications are cut, when the plan falls apart, and when your GPS is gone, the fight will fall to you. The burden of decision-making will descend upon the shoulders of our sergeants and our small unit leaders. I say all the time, it's going to be captains and corporals that win this next fight. The very concept of leadership will shift from simply executing orders to understanding the commander's intent and having the initiative to act on your own. The lessons we are learning from Ukraine and Israel are a living demonstration of this. Ukrainian small units, outmatched on paper, have had to exercise extreme initiative. Their squad leaders have adapted on the fly, using commercial technology like off-the-shelf drones to conduct their own reconnaissance, direct fires, and coordinate with neighboring units. Their disciplined initiative, speed, and adaptability have been key to their success against a much larger, more rigid force. In the Israeli context, we've seen the need for immediate, localized decision-making in a rapidly changing threat environment. The use of missile and drone swarms by groups like Hamas or Hezbollah demands responsive action at the lowest levels. You don't have the luxury of waiting for permission to engage. You have to make the right decision right now based on your understanding of the mission. All right, let me conclude here, and then I'm going to briefly touch on the five things that I was asked to touch on, and then I'll turn it over to you for questions. All right, so your responsibility. The Air Force Sergeants Association represents the foundation of our Air Force, and together with your joint partners, you are the foundation of our entire military. The small unit leadership you represent is not just important, it is the key to our survival in the future fight. The China challenge and the Taiwan contingency are real. I don't have to overemphasize that. The success of our nation, the security of our allies, and the future of operations will not be decided in a high-tech command center. It will be decided by you in a disconnected, chaotic environment, making decisions with limited information and a clear understanding of the commander's intent. Mission command is not an abstract concept. It is an operational necessity. Your professionalism, your initiative, and your disciplined actions will not just affect your squad or your team, they will ripple across the entire battle space. The future of warfare is a return to trust and empowerment at the lowest levels. Your role as an NCO is no longer just to follow orders. It is to lead with initiative, think critically, and make the right call when it matters most. I have always defined a warfighter by one simple term. Whether you're a Marine, a Guardian, Coastie, shipmate, airman, soldier, you name it. One simple term defines, in my eyes, what a warfighter is. And that doesn't matter if you're infantry, special operations, a pilot, logistician, admin, or communications, and everything in between. A warfighter has one thing in common with all other warfighters, and that is a bias for action. In the fight you all may face, Mission Command is that bias for action. Okay, so I was asked to address that's my piece on the importance of Mission Command, from the history to the current fight and into the future, and why all of you must take that disciplined initiative. And now is your prep time to be masters of your tradecraft. I was asked to touch on 5 specific things. I'll touch on these briefly, and then I'm going to take any questions you may have. So what are the core tenets of Mission Command in joint and interagency operations? Bottom line, Mission Command hinges on trust. I'm not going to empower you to act if I don't trust you. You have to have clarity of intent and, again, disciplined initiative. In joint and interagency environments where complexity is the norm, success requires a shared understanding across services. This is why joint is critical. Across services, agencies, and echelons, built through constant communication and mutual respect. You must have a clear understanding of the commander's intent, because the last time you hear it may be the last time you hear it. It empowers teams to act decisively within their lanes, even amidst ambiguity. And I would offer that if you can understand your commander's intent, that is necessary as well. Trust not just downward, but laterally and upward, earned over time and solidified in execution. Disciplined initiative, especially in fast evolving domains like space and cyber, where leaders must often act before permission can be sought. In my experience, the most effective operations were those where leadership empowered decision-making at the tactical edge. It's very common in the Marine Corps, where I come from, for the senior PFC or the Lance Corporal to be on point at a squad and leading. All right, the next one, how to balance decentralized execution with command oversight. It starts and ends with trusting your people and training them properly. And far too often I hear about, hey, I got to take care of my people. If you truly want to take care of your people, that means you are training them for the worst day that they may ever encounter in combat. Not by letting them go home early at noon, but by training them properly. You cannot decentralize execution if you haven't developed capable, ethical, and well-informed leaders. And I emphasize ethical because we are going to need our allies and partners to view what we're doing as legitimate. And if we're not acting ethically, history tells us they will drop off. So my approach is quite frankly threefold. Set the left and right limits early, define risk tolerance boundaries and what success looks like. Check in, not check up. Oversight does not mean micromanaging. It means enabling, resourcing, and occasionally redirecting its efforts if efforts drift. And then leading with values. Empowerment works best when leaders are anchored in character, not just competence. Number three, my lessons from leading at Cybercom and Space Command. There's a lot. I'm just going to pick out a couple here. One is strategic context matters. Tactical excellence means leading with little without strategic alignment. Every move has geopolitical impact. And this is where tactical actions can lead to strategic events. I talked about the Arab Spring. One individual empowered in an information environment led to the overthrow of multiple governments, far more powerful than a single bullet. I believe that culture drives innovation. I prioritize building trust, flattening communication, and rewarding critical thinking, especially in a joint environment where culture matters. Number four, building empowered, resilient teams in high-tempo environments. The most resilient teams I led weren't just skilled, they were bonded by purpose, values, and mutual respect. To build that, I have a few things here. One, you have to start left of leadership. Just like we talk about left of boom or left of launch, start left of leadership. Before the chaos hits, you build trust, clarify expectations, and model excellence. You empower through ownership. I gave Marines and civilians often the chance to lead, decide, and to fail forward. And when that happens, that's a learning opportunity, not just a counseling opportunity, but a learning opportunity. Real leaders take the time when they see someone fail to see where we can learn, grow, and improve. Normalize feedback and pressure. High op tempo isn't just the enemy. Lack of clarity and lack of care are. Lastly, practical takeaways for leaders at every level. Just a few things I thought of that I think will help all of you. You must lead with clarity and consistency. Whether you're in a foxhole, a skiff, people follow what they understand. And if you're erratic, they're not going to follow. You must be calm in crisis and consistent. Build trust before you need it. I talked about left of boom, left of launch, and left of leadership. You have to build trust left of that before you need it. Relationships are a warfighting asset. I promise you, for the rest of your life, relationships will help you achieve more. Master the fundamentals. Communication, character, accountability, and humility matter more than just credentials. You must master those. Know your people. Talent management isn't an HR function. It is a leadership imperative. And lastly, never stop learning. While I led for over 30 years and still study every day to improve, I continue to learn. I continue to be really, especially in the new era of tech, doing everything I can to spend time with young people, young individuals, academics, because that's where the learning is occurring today, not just on the modern battlefield. So with that, I'm going to go to the chat room. Okay, I don't see anything in there. That concludes my remarks on Mission Command. I would now like to see if anyone has any questions, anything you want to throw at me on this subject. I don't know if you want me to talk for 20 more minutes, but I can do so if you want. Okay. I hope I don't get your name wrong. Jamil Vasquez Perez. What are some lessons you learned or training you received later in your career that would have helped you as a young NCO? Something you wish you had earlier in your career? You know, that's a really good question. And I'll say this. Early on in my career, especially at the tactical level, I didn't always have the context. I knew we were doing something, but I didn't always know where it fit in. And I don't necessarily mean as a young staff sergeant at 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, as we were deploying to Okinawa, why we were doing that. But it would have been nice probably to understand how this fits into the Indo-Pacific commander's intent, so that as we train and as we align our training, we're also focusing on the message and understanding what we're trying to achieve. Yes, I was a small cog in the wheel, just a single Marine, a staff sergeant while I was out there, and there's a 4-star in Hawaii leading all of this. But understanding context as I grew as a senior NCO and later on as a command senior enlisted leader, I found to be far more important, especially in this conversation about mission command, because I would often travel without my 4-star boss, and I didn't have the luxury of reaching back and asking him what he thought on the subject. And so I would just have to execute based on, I knew the commander's intent and I understand the broader context of why it matters. So as I talked to operational and tactical units, I could do that. And so, Jamil, I would say ultimately context matters, and understanding where higher headquarters would like us to execute. That's what I would say there. I hope that helps. Could you please repeat anchored in character? Amy, good question here. I don't know specifically what you're referring to, but here's what I would offer. When we go to fight, let's say, God forbid, it is China or any nation, we are not going to do that alone. We're going to have our allies and partners. We're probably going to have the commercial sector supporting us from tech, maybe even academia. And you all probably have heard of Abu Ghraib and the horrific events that happened there. Well, if you think of that, that was really counter character. But what else did that do? Because of our actions, and I say our because that was our service members that did what they did, that led to really the enemy looking at us and saying, this is what they think of us. This is what they think of us as people. This is what they think of our religion, our men, our women, so on and so forth. And they took that moment, that lack of character, and they turned it into a recruiting campaign. And because we didn't display and fight with our character, that led the enemy to really have a resurgence and to re-energize. Another way of thinking about this is legitimacy. If we go to war like we did in World War I or World War II, it was really easy for the world to see why that was legitimate, why we needed to be in that fight. Okay, if we ever get into a conflict and we're not fighting with our character, with integrity, with our values and morals, it's going to be hard to ask Australia, the United Kingdom, Canada to come along when we're acting outside of our character. So we must be anchored in character. That doesn't mean war is less violent. Quite the opposite. War is the war of the future. The battles of the future are likely going to be so horrific, far more than we've seen before, where single DF-21 missiles from China sinks an entire aircraft carrier potentially, and thousands are instantly dead. Where the homeland can be struck and say an area like New York City or Washington, D.C. is obliterated quickly. And so we must fight with our character, because the moment we don't do that, the moment we are questioning whether our allies are questioning whether this is legitimate or not, is a moment we likely lose and we go it alone. And so I believe character is critical in our fight. Doesn't mean you can't fix bayonets and hook and jab. You may have to do that, but you can do that with your morals and your values, knowing that you're fighting a lawful enemy and doing it the right way under the rules of armed conflict. Hopefully that helps. Thank you. All right, I've been going for about 40 minutes here. Other questions, comments, concerns, thoughts? Anything on our mind? Hey, ultimately, mission command, while it may be a term new to you, is not something new. You look at World War II, how we fought on the ground, in the air, at sea, whether it was a lieutenant flying an aircraft, whether it was a corporal taking over because his company commander was killed in combat. Junior enlisted, junior officers, and NCOs have done this before. The difference going forward is since the Gulf War, we have had pretty much dominance in the space domain and in the cyber domain where we can communicate effectively. And we have become used to that. We have become used to using a GPS whenever we need. We have become used to communicating wherever and whenever we need across the globe. And that is not going to be the case. And so in our training and our rehearsals and our planning and our exercises, just like we should never plan for us to have all of our aircraft up at one time, and that is not a hit on the Air Force. I love the Air Force. It's a reality of the maintenance cycle. We should never plan to be able to speak and have our cyber domain operating efficiently 24/7. And so if you go to an exercise and you go to a training event or any scenario as such, and the internet is always working, and their JWICS is always up, and your GPS signal is always working, and SATCOM is always working, turn to your leadership and say, we are failing our people because this is not how we're going to fight. We have to fight. We have to train just like we're going to fight. Ashley, as we are increasingly operating in joint environments, what advice would you give to those young in their services to help them operate in that new environment together as seamlessly as possible? That's a phenomenal question, Ashley. And I realize that not all AFSCs, MOSs, ratings, jobs, pick your joint term, have the opportunity to serve in the joint fight. If you're in intelligence or space or cyber or things like that, maybe admin, you're gonna find more opportunities to serve in joint. I was a career intelligence professional, so my second assignment, I was working in joint, and I learned what I called the Navy's Star Wars language, right? The R2D2, an IS-2, a CT-3. I learned early on what all of those mean, and they learned about Marine Corps culture, right? What is a master gunnery sergeant? Why do we call everyone exactly by their rank? You're not a sergeant, you're a staff sergeant, you're a gunnery sergeant, all those things. Well, that's our culture. And so you get an opportunity to learn that. Here's what I would offer you, Ashley. And I don't know your age or your rank, but first and foremost, learn your trade craft, learn your job, be great at your profession. Don't worry about the outside noise and those other things. Be really good at what you do. Whatever that thing is, be the greatest admin professional, intelligence professional, maintainer, you name it. Be really good at that. And then branch off when you can. If there's an opportunity to go to a joint PME, you want to come to the Marine Corps Sergeant's Course, the Staff Academy, you want to go to the Navy Senior Enlisted Academy, the Army Sergeants Majors Academy, any opportunities like that, take advantage of them. If you wake up in the morning and say, that makes me nervous or uncomfortable, then go do it, because that's where learning occurs. That's where you get the opportunity. You may not get an opportunity to go from your current unit to a joint assignment, but if you can, take advantage of that as well. All right. And then certainly there's an opportunity to just learn via the internet, to learn not just about the ranks, but the cultures of other services, right? As an example, every single Marine knows at least two things: where they were born and when. And I don't mean them as a person, but I mean the fact that they were born in Tun Tavern, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on the 10th of November, 1775. We all know this. You can't see it, but right behind me, I've got sand from Iwo Jima and Guadalcanal. Those things are fundamental to our core values as Marines, in our culture. And each service has that as well. So it's not just knowing the ranks, it's understanding the culture of the services. And I implore leadership when they get to these joint commands to not apply their service culture to the others. As an example, some services are more lenient or more open for handing out end-of-tour awards or service awards. Others, quite frankly, my own, that is kind of counterculture. But what you don't want to do is come in as a Marine and say, hey, we don't do this, so you're not going to get an award, because you're then sabotaging or harming someone else's career in their service. It's an opportunity to learn, to take those great tools and to bring them over to your own service. I used Colonel Billy Mitchell in here. I love his mentality and his thinking. Yes, he was in the Army Air Service and then later became the Army Air Corps. But I think we have to think through things much like he did. When others were calling it a flying kite, he said this is an opportunity to change the way we fight in the maritime and air domain. And so those service cultures are critical. And when you can, again, try to find an opportunity to go to a joint PME, or if you're seeing a symposium that is out there, hosted by the Army, and you're in the Air Force and you get an opportunity to go to it, do it. You're going to leave thinking, wow, they think differently, they operate differently, but hopefully you see a couple things that are relate to their service, to their culture, that you say, hey, this is a pretty good idea. All right. So I hope that answers your question, Ashley. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Jamil, great question again. And I apologize if I'm getting your name wrong. What do you wish the general public knew more about when it comes to misinformation and deep fakes? Well, good Lord, we could spend some serious time on here in the information environment and everything. I think we're all too often quick to judge. I think we're all too often quick to celebrate the failings and the, I'll use the term sins. Again, I don't mean this biblically, but the sins of others. And as an example, there was a rock concert recently where I guess a CEO and one of his employees were found in an affectionate photo. I found it both sad and interesting how so many people took delight in their failings as humans, because at the end of the day, I don't know many of you that can walk on water. I certainly cannot, and I'm not perfect either. And so I worry that not only do, when we see real things, that we take great pleasure in the failings of others, but now in this era of deep fakes, where terms like revenge pornography, as an example, I had a friend retired recently, a 3-star general, and a buddy of mine he's a Dallas Cowboy fan. He had a fake Jerry Jones video created just using AI. And I was initially watching it, and I swear to you, I thought this was real. I thought it was. And then he went on for quite some time. And I thought to myself, okay, Jerry Jones doesn't have this much time. So this is obviously fake. What we have to do is be able to think critically. Understand that much of our media is corporately owned, which means it is beholden to shareholders, which means it is driven by ratings and advertising revenue. You're rarely going to see anything on the news that says, this young man walked an old lady across the street, because it doesn't bleed, so it doesn't lead, right? And that's being simplistic, but we have to train our minds to understand that corporate media has to make money, and the way you make money is oftentimes by being outrageous. Same thing on social media. Rarely are you going to see any posts with someone that accomplished something incredible, getting hundreds of thousands of engagements and likes. But if you see something that's horrific or sad or over the top fascinating, whatever, even if it's not true, that's going to get more engagement. So we have to retrain our minds to understand that oftentimes we are the product. If it's free, we're the product, and we're the one that's being sold, our time and our attention. So pay attention to that. Know that things today are going to get more and more complex with deep fakes, misinformation, disinformation, all of the above. I think you got to think critically. I would advise everyone to read, especially history, as much as they can, and then to challenge what we think we know. Okay? Because again, as junior enlisted, as NCOs, you're going to be the one that has to sift through all of this noise and come out on the other end making decisions, because we got to act. We can't just say, I don't know if it's real or not. We have to make decisions and act. It's a challenge. And my answer wasn't simplistic, nor was it easy, because this is not a 1 + 1 = 2 equation. But I wish folks like my mom and dad didn't believe everything they saw on social media. And I wish others weren't so quick to react to the misfortunes and the challenges of others. Because at the end of the day, we're all human. We all make mistakes. I think most of you, if not all of you on this event right here, try your best to do your best, but we're not perfect. And so whether you see a deep fake and you're fooled like I have been, or you read something you're not quite sure, before you disseminate it, before you act, double check it, triple check it. One last example. I served as a senior enlisted leader for the National Security Agency. And when I did, I served for one of the best leaders of my life, General Paul Nakasone. And about 4 or 5 months ago, I had a LinkedIn connection request, from a guy named Paul Nakasone. Now, I know him very, very well. I know his family, his wife, I know very well. Talk to him fairly often. And so when I saw that, I didn't, Paul wants to connect with me. I thought, this is fake. I went into it thinking instantly, I don't think so. Let me send him a text. And so I did. And then he confirmed that it was actually him. And so that's just kind of the way we have to do business now, is confirm before we execute. Make sure that we think through it. But in times of critical, when it's critical, you're going to have to make decisions. And so this is why the future battle space is complex. It's challenging, because China is not only likely going to fight us kinetically across the information space, economic and diplomatically, but if they can get 5 to 10% of our public to doubt the legitimacy of the fight, that's going to challenge our elected leaders to say whether or not we should continue to do that. And they may be able to stop us from fighting before the fight even begins. Okay. And that's in the information space. So hopefully that helps you. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Got your name right. See, Marines can spell. I saw Phil Easton on there. So Phil, I can spell and read. All right. Anyone, anything else? I think we're creeping up on time here for the next session. If not, it was an honor to be here with all of you. If you want anything more, you want to communicate more with me, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. Send me a connection request. We can follow up on some things, whether it's one-on-one or small unit engagements, you name it. Please take this seriously. Take your profession seriously. Understand that whether you're stationed on base or forward deployed, likely wherever you are stationed, wherever you are, is going to be where we're fighting from. Okay. Thank you very much. And I'm not quite sure how we end this, but thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your time. Thank you.